Good afternoon to you. Welcome to Newsfeed. I'm Stephen Krutt. It's good to have you along with us this afternoon. It looks like we're going to have another Eskom briefing. We're on lockdown level 3 at the moment. You know, they've been changing quite quickly recently. So lockdown level 3 load shedding level 3 at the moment. Load shedding level 3 at the moment. Now, we do see that this briefing is about to begin. This is an Eskom briefing. We do expect that the Eskom CEO and director once again will be a part of it. Now, not entirely sure what is going to be announced today. That could not be announced yesterday. There are some indications that there might be more information about the grid or about Eskom that they need to tell the nation. We'll be live on that for the afternoon. We'll have reaction to that as well. Just other stories we're keeping an eye on this afternoon. Of course, watching the coalition talks very closely. Professor Bonang Mahale is going to talk about leadership, where we are in the country and why we are here at the moment. That Eskom briefing now starting. Let's go straight there.
What I would also like you to do, colleagues, the media, to write on the chat box what time is best for us to have this daily briefing. We are thinking about holding it in the morning every day. Please advise us as to what is the best time to do this. This you can write on the chat box. Andre, the floor is yours, please.
Right, thank you, Sikanati, and thanks to everybody on the call for joining us. We really appreciate that. As Sikanati has said, we want to provide as much information as possible to South Africa via the media in order to ensure that we are able to keep everybody informed, not only about the current state of generation, but also about some of the challenges that we face, and also share as proactively as possible if there is an emerging risk that you need to be aware of, to give as much line of sight as possible to everybody on the call. Ms. Mokoena will take questions afterwards. Thank you very much. Right, so let's first start with where we are right now. As at 3 o'clock, we were sitting with planned maintenance of 7,261 megawatts. So that is the capacity that we have taken offline in order to do planned maintenance. And this is quite important to emphasize that this is a structured program. Part of reliability maintenance, so this is planned, and these are outages where we have units out at Arnott, at Duva, at Grootvlei, at Kendal, at Kriel, at Kusile, at Majuba, 2 at Matla, and 1 each at Medupi and Tutuka. So this is an indication that we are carrying on with our planned maintenance, and of course what it means is that that capacity is not available at the moment. Summer months typically have a lower demand overall, and therefore our preferred time for carrying out maintenance is during summer months, but of course, as we have seen, the increase in ambient temperatures have also exposed some of the weaknesses in our cooling water systems, and that has led to unplanned outages. So if I can go back to so-called full losses, unplanned outages, at this point in time, units that are out in their entirety, 6,080. This is a number that has improved considerably since we were forced to implement load shedding stage 4, and in particular we have seen Letabo come back, 3 units at Letabo, totaling 1,800 megawatts of generation capacity. So that is a very pleasing improvement. Then in addition to these units that are out in their entirety, we have so-called partial losses. Now, what is a partial loss? A partial loss is when we operate a unit with a known defect or a constraint. So, for example, there is a boiler tube leak which we don't yet have to repair, but in order to ensure that we can keep the megawatts on the grid, we lower the output from that unit in order to avoid exacerbating the problem that we've got. The partial losses that we have at the moment are just over 5,000 megawatts, 5,050 to be precise, for a total unplanned load loss of 11,130. So this is a reasonably good number. You may recall that when we were facing stage 4 load shedding at one stage, our unplanned outages were as high as 17,000. So there's been a very good recovery in the unplanned outages. We also have what are other losses, and these are primarily to do with issues pertaining to coal on the one hand, as well as disposal of ash, and that is sitting at 762 megawatts at the moment. So that is a satisfactory number overall. We are intending to return a Matimba as well as a Majuba unit later tonight, and that will add about 800 megawatts of capacity. Hopefully we'll get that on the grid in time for peak, which will further help us to preserve some of our much needed reserves. The outlook for peak tonight is that we have a load forecast, a demand of 28,271. We have capacity available, excluding our OCGTs, of 26,973, which means that we have a shortfall that we need to make up with both OCGTs and also through load shedding. So that's the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment. Overall, we remain on track for lifting load shedding by 5 o'clock on Saturday morning, as we communicated yesterday, so that forecast remains intact. We have been able to recover our emergency diesel reserves at Gerikwa. That is currently sitting at 100%. At Ankerlig, diesel levels are at 83%, so I think the team has done exceptionally well to secure enough supplies of diesel to restore the tank capacities there to very acceptable levels. And then from a pumped storage perspective, we have also had a good opportunity overnight to recover our dam levels, and we are currently sitting with 20 hours of generation at our Drakensberg pumped storage facility, 10 hours at Ingula, and 25 hours at Palmiet, bearing in mind, of course, that Palmiet is a very small unit. Colleagues, that is where we are in terms of the outlook for the generation system. We intend to return another unit at Camden tomorrow. The Camden units are quite small. They typically deliver in the order of about 150 megawatts each if they run at full capacity, which they typically don't, so we can expect about another 130 coming out of that facility. That's where we are with regard to the generation outlook for the next 24 hours, and as Sikonati has said, we intend to give you a further update tomorrow morning. At this stage, we've got 10 o'clock penciled in for that. We will confirm that at a later stage. If I can request my colleague, Mr. Monde Bala, to please give us an overview of the latest state of play on the distribution network and where we are with regard to any opportunities that we have there and any risks that we might face. Monde, please.
Yeah, Andre, thanks a lot for the opportunity. Yeah, I think maybe just to start off with, we've had quite a number of queries regarding what we've shared yesterday regarding the state of play with regards to some of the issues of non-compliance by some of our customers. Colleagues, I can indicate that we are ongoing with the investigation. We have discovered that certain of our customers, those that are in the main that are doing their own load shedding, because as licensed distributors, we are required to do our own load shedding. In certain instances where the municipalities in the main cannot do their own load shedding, we do load shedding on their behalf. We have the total number of municipalities that are licensed distributors. We do the load shedding of quite a number of them, with the exception of the 28, of which the main metros are part of the 28. So when it was discovered that we did not get the requisite reduction in the load, we then looked at where the issues were. We then discovered that that's where the problem in the main lay, and it lay mainly on our key industrial customers, those that are on the curtailment program, wherein we discovered that 45% of our key industrial customers that are on the curtailment program did not fully meet their requirements. It was with dismay that some of them actually did not meet their requirements at all. And also we then discovered that some of the municipalities also did not meet their full requirement. We have invoked the remedial actions to correct the situation going forward. For starters, we've notified all the customers that did not fully comply. We've given them notice. Letters in this regard have been drafted and are currently being sent. We have engaged the regulator. We had a meeting with them this afternoon to share with them our concerns, because this matter now lies in their purview, and their process will then need to kick in, because it is their obligation to enforce in terms of the license conditions. Over and above that, we have activated our local teams to ensure that in the event that we do not receive the requisite drop in the load as dictated by the system operator, that our team must do the switching on behalf of those that are not giving us their full allocation. So those are the remedial actions that we've taken up until now. But from a distribution point of view, our local control centers are fully on standby. They are currently undertaking all the switching that is in line with the schedules. Our local technicians are on the ground to deal with whatever issues that may come up from time to time. And yeah, we remain on high alert in terms of ensuring that the system is indeed intact and again on instruction from the system operator. Andre, I think I've covered the issues from the distribution side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monde. If I can just correct the dam levels, please. At Drakensberg, we've got 90 generation hours. At Ingula, 47 generation hours, and at Palmit, 49 generation hours. Apologies for that correction. Colleagues, I think it's, of course, very important for us also to distinguish between what is now called by certain members of the media blackouts. This terminology is in fact not correct. What we are implementing is called load shedding, and you may think that this is a euphemism. It is not. A blackout is exactly what we are trying to avoid by implementing load shedding. A blackout is what we have seen in Texas, for example, where you have an extended system outage for a number of days, in some instances even weeks. Similarly, this is what occurred in Zambia. We've seen similar blackouts in parts of California when there are various system challenges. And this is when the entire system is unable to maintain its frequency at 50 or 60 hertz, as the case may be, depending on where you are in the world. And that then leads to a total loss of electricity transmission and distribution capacity. So that is the catastrophic outcome that we are trying to avoid by managing the demand through load shedding. And at least this is, of course, very unfortunate, but this is, it is an important matter that we need to take into account, that we just get that terminology right, please. And I think if I can name names, ENCA in particular seems to have these two concepts mixed up. We also, I think, are exploring a number of options to add more megawatts to the grid. As I said yesterday, we welcome the recent announcement of preferred bidders for bid window 5. Eskom itself is also exploring a number of projects. Part of the money that has initially been promised to us flowing from COP26 will be made available for new generation projects. But we have every intention to accommodate more private sector generation capacity. We believe that ultimately the private sector, like has been the trend internationally, has a much enhanced role to play in bringing new generation capacity online. We are working on some of the modalities around that, how we can accelerate it and how we can enable it. But just to stress that the legal separation, in particular of our transmission business, will be a key enabler of bringing additional private sector investment to the generation space. And that is why that is such a key strategic intervention for us. Moving on then, I think, to demand management. We have yesterday referred to demand management. You are familiar, I would hope, with the power alerts that appear on our TV screens when the system is under pressure. And we really have, I think, opportunities here to, again, work together as a country. We typically see, when that power alert goes up on the screens, very good support from South Africans, in the order of about 200 to 250 megawatts. That may not sound like a lot, but it is very important for us to ensure that we can reduce the peak that we experience and thereby avoid any further instability in the system. So again, we want to thank the South African public for their cooperation in this regard, and it really is noticeable that when we put those power alerts up, that it's very pleasing to see that we have a really positive response from members of the public. Sekunati, at this point, going to stop and hand over to you for any questions that you might have at this particular time.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you, Monde, for that update. Monde, yesterday you also did answer the question that has just been posed to us by Nobukanya Mtambo of Jacaranda FM, where you spoke about the go slow or the industrial action that we had from some of our employees last week. You said yesterday there is now no go slow or any industrial action because that matter has been resolved for the benefit of those who need this repeated. There have been other questions as well about allegations of a go slow by the workers. What's the status there, please? And which workers were these in the first place? In what part of Eskom? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Konati, for the opportunity to state once more that there is no go slow in Eskom. We did have a situation with some of our employees on the week that ended on the 28th and 29th of October. Wherein mainly in the Sentin area, there was some unhappiness with some of our employees. That situation was addressed. It was resolved within that weekend. People are back at work. There is nobody that is on a go slow. I may also add at this point that the Eskom employees are fully dedicated to serve the customers and the country, and that they do so without sparing themselves. So thank you, Skonati.
Not so easy, sir. What was that situation and when was it resolved? What was its impact? Then I have the next question for you right there from Chris Yeland. Can you name the major key industrial customers that did not comply with instructions from the system operator to shed load? Let's start, finish off please with the workers. Give us all the detail that you can. Thank you.
Yeah. On the situation of the workers, Mr. Manjanja, that situation was resolved on the 29th of October. It was fully resolved. The people were back at work that very following day. Yes, due to that situation, we had quite a number of customers that had called in to say that they were without supply following the load shedding of the Thursday evening. But by that weekend, all of that had been fully resolved, and that the situation had been normalized by that weekend. So it was mainly linked to the issue of overtime that the employees were unhappy with. So that was the issue, and indeed it was resolved. Can we name if I can move on to the question about the key industrial customers? We do have the list of those key industrial customers. However, we are not in a position at this point in time to provide those names. We are actually not in a position to name those. These are governed by the supply agreements that we've got with those particular customers, and we are not at liberty to disclose the details of customers. But we do have the list, and we have addressed with each of those key industrial customers. We are monitoring the situation, and we are quite comfortable with the interactions that we've had with them. That the situation has been amicably resolved. We do also want to indicate that as part of the remedial actions, we do have the right and the obligation, if should they not comply the next time around, to move them out of curtailment and put them straight into load shedding, and ensure that we achieve the megawatts reduction that is required. Thank you, Mr. Manjanja. I hope that suffices for now.
For now, Mr. Bala, that does indeed suffice. There is an additional question that I will answer myself, comes from Xolile Bengu of the Mercury. She says, please name the municipalities in KZN that are not complying with the load shedding directive. Xolile, in KZN, there's only one municipality that has complied, and that was named as eThekwini municipality. That's on that matter. I have another follow-up question from Chris Yelland's a question on the customers. And you will be pleased, Andre, to note that this comes from Nobuhle Semelane of the BBC. I do not know which BBC this is. She wants to know if there are any repercussions for these key industrial customers and indeed municipalities. Nobuhle Monde said already that information has now been handed to the regulator, whose responsibility it is to enforce the rules and indeed the rules regarding the system operator. Please direct your questions, therefore, to NERSA, whether there are any repercussions for such customers who do not comply with their obligations. I'm now going, colleague, to the hands that have been raised. Please briefly ask your questions and limit them to two, please. I'll start with Sabelo Skiti and then with Sophie Mukwena in that order. A question, colleagues, is that sentence followed by a question mark, not a speech. Thank you. You also have to unmute yourself. We have unmuted from our side. Please unmute yourself and then ask your question. Sabelo Skiti, are you ready, Sophie?
Yes, I'm ready. Open my mic. Oh, okay. This first question is directed to Mr. Derete. Mr. Derete, you spoke about COP26 and the commitments and pledges made that can assist us moving from the cleaner energy. The 120 million rand pledge by US and other European countries. What was the role of Eskom in negotiating this, and what's your reaction to Minister of Environmental Affairs saying they're not going to sign, and the Minister of Energy saying he will rather go to court if they are compelled to sign such agreements, even mobilizing the continent? And the last question directed to Mr. Bala. The issue of municipalities, is this not because of the level of trust in Eskom, where municipality can even violate the agreement? Is this not because of Eskom's failure to deliver, and municipality find themselves under pressure from their constituency? This is a fear of government, and it has got political connotations, particularly at the time where South Africa was going to local government elections.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. Before you answer the question, Andre, please lower your hand, ma'am, once you are dealt with. Sabelo, are you able to ask your question now? All right. Let's leave Sabelo for now. There's a button, Sabelo, where you can unmute yourself. Andre, are you? Please help us with a response. Then you will follow immediately after Andre.
So, Ms. Mukwena, the announcement that was made at COP was by 4 governments as well as the European Union, who pledged to make available to South Africa for decarbonization an amount of 8.5 billion with the B US dollars, which translates into roughly, depending on the exchange rate that you use, 131 billion rand. This agreement, or this commitment, now needs to be translated into an agreement between the South African government and those governments. A technical task team has already been established under the leadership of the presidency. The presidency has nominated a senior official to coordinate and lead that technical task team, and negotiations will commence, I am told, very shortly in order to enable that to happen. The funds at this stage are allocated to 3 areas. The first is for the Eskom Just Energy Transition, which we expect to receive the lion's share of this first initial allocation of funds, and as well to support the introduction of electric vehicles into South Africa, as well as a transition to an increasingly hydrogen-based economy. If you ask me for percentages, that obviously lies more in the political domain, but as I said, I would expect Iscom, given the fact that we have been leading the discussions with the lender governments and their developmental financing institutions, that these have been led and facilitated in a very clear way by Eskom, and we have been intimately involved in those discussions right from its inception. The statements made around a refusal to sign an agreement does not relate to the signing of this loan agreement. This is a completely separate issue, and I think we must distinguish very clearly between those two. The statements made by Minister Creasy and by Minister Mantashe relate to a commitment by a number of countries, if I recall correctly, 30 countries at COP, to no longer pursue new coal projects. Of course, that is entirely within South Africa's sovereign right to decline to sign such a commitment, and my understanding, and you are welcome to clarify this with both DFFE and DMRE, is that what the 2 ministers referred to is at this point in time that South Africa is not willing to sign that commitment. So it's got nothing to do with a loan agreement, but it's got to do with a commitment not to pursue further coal-based projects. Thank you, Sikonati.
Right, thank you. Monde, please come on.
Yeah, thank you, Sikonati. Just in response to the question by Mamkwena, yeah, I would not like to speculate on the reasons for the non-compliance by some of our customers. Safe to say that I would trust that all of us are responsible. As South Africans, would not like to see the grid collapse, because that in its own has got its own repercussions, I think, as articulated by the Chief Executive. Safe to say that we have identified this non-compliance, and we are dealing with it with the respective entities, and we do believe and trust that that it will be corrected, and that if it does not get corrected, then we've also got some of the levers to make sure that going forward we correct it. If I may, Sikonati, I know there is a question from Chris Yelland regarding the City of Cape Town that they've denied that they did not comply. I'm not going to go into the details of the denial. Safe to say that we are engaging with the City of Cape Town. We are aware that they do have a facility called Steenras, which they use as a cushion against certain stages of load shedding. And I think, what we are confirming is that with the previous events, we have not seen the benefit of that, and we will be engaging with the City of Cape Town just to make sure that we are aligned on what we're seeing from our own system. Sikonati, I hope I've addressed the question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Indeed, you have so far. I just wish to add that on the issue of trust that Sophie raised, that may well indeed be the case, or any other way, but the rules are binding on all the distributors to carry out the system operator's instruction in order to protect the grid so as to avoid a real blackout. Thank you. Next question comes from Adri, who has not identified the media house. Since Quebec produces South Africa's cheapest electricity, will you be encouraging the development of more nuclear power? Andre, that will be a question for you. And the next question comes from Faisal Patel of Radio Islam. South Africans are suffering major losses with regards to the impact of load shedding. Can Eskom not subsidize alternative power sources for poorer households to keep the lights on? These may include generators, inverters, etc. That's a question and a suggestion from Faisal Patel. I will leave these to you. First, Andre, on the nuclear question, and indeed you can tackle the second suggestion from Faisal. Then we will go to the hands that have been raised by Jan Vermeulen, and I will give you the other names. Jan Vermeulen and Clyde Melanson, after the response to this one. Thank you.
Right, so Audrey is indeed correct that the cash cost of Koeberg's generation is the lowest in the fleet. This is due to the fact that the fuel cost of Koeberg is significantly lower than the coal cost that a thermal power station requires. So you need to take into account, however, that there is a difference between the cost of a new nuclear power station, which is significantly more expensive, rough order of magnitude, unit for unit, about 10 times more expensive than, for example, photovoltaic, and slightly less so in the case of wind. And this is because of the extraordinary safety measures that have to go into the design and construction of a nuclear power station. Bear in mind that Koeberg is now getting on for 39 years old, and it has therefore been amortized. So the depreciation and amortization costs that you typically see with a new facility have already been taken care of, and the cash cost really is only staff and fuel, and those are quite low. So to extrapolate from the Koeberg cost to new nuclear would not be an appropriate comparison. Siganati, I'm going to suggest that we turn the question on PV and so forth to and inverters, that we turn that over to Mondo, please.
Yeah, no, thanks, Andre, for that. Yeah, I think we will take the suggestion by Faisal, and definitely it's some of the solutions that we are looking at going into the future. So yes, when the time is right, we will get back with our full proposals. But yeah, I think we just need to make sure that we follow the proper governance to get to that point. Thank you, Skonat.
Thank you, Monde. Next, please, Jan Vermeulen and then Clyde Melanson. And lower your hand, please, once you ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sikunati. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great stuff. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Two questions, as per your instructions. Thank you very much. The first one has got to do with the municipalities. Just to confirm that indeed there are 28 municipalities in total that handle their own load shedding schedules, and 2 of them did not fully comply during the last stage 2 announcement. And whether we can get a list those offending municipalities, or all 28 for that matter. And then the second question, just a request for more data. There's a lot of writing happening around Eskom's maintenance, and for example, Microso commenting that plants go into planned maintenance and then immediately go into unplanned breakdown, and leading to a lot of speculation about what's gone wrong at these power plants that's causing this. And there's dribs and drabs of information, but it would be great to get data on, for example, how much, say, maintenance over the last 4 years has been deferred that is now coming back to bite you. If you can provide any data in that regard, it would be incredibly useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Clyde? Please mute, Jan. Clyde, please will you unmute yourself and address us? Okay, we shall come back to you. Mariam Issa, are you able to unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you, Sekonathi. I have a follow-up question to the one on the COP26 agreements. I do understand that the statements made by the Environment Minister and Minister Mantashe were related to not committing to no longer pursuing new coal projects. But that does seem to be at odds with the aim of the concessional finance, which was to transition away from carbon. And I just wondered whether, in your opinion, Mr. de Ruyter, whether this throws up any sort of clashes of purpose that need to be discussed and resolved.
Thank you, Mariam. Please do lower your hand. Monde, tackle please the question on the municipalities, and I shall leave the next one to Andre. The follow-up to that question on municipalities comes from Carol on the chat. She wants to know whether it's all 28 that have not complied. Thank you.
Yeah, a question to from Jan on yes, it's 28 municipalities that do their own load shedding, Jan, and it's not 2 that are non-compliant. We said based on what we could pick up from our system, the 2 were fully compliant. The others were not, were either partially or not compliant. So that would be the balance. So Sekonathi, if you can help me with the next question from Carol.
You have just answered it.
Okay.
She wanted to know if it's all those 28 or just 2 that didn't comply. Do you want to repeat the answer?
Yeah. No, the answer is that the 2 were fully compliant based on what we could pick up from our own from the Eskom system. 2 were fully compliant. And then the others were either partially or some were not compliant. So, and those are the ones that we are currently investigating. Thank you.
Thanks, Monde. Andre, please will you deal with Mariam Issa's question?
Right, thanks. I think first just to cover Jan's question on more data. Jan, unfortunately, that will require a bit of analysis and work. We can certainly assist you to unpack that, looking at our annual financial statements over the past 4 years and just making sure that we can, in fact, help you to understand that data. If you want operational data, then I would refer you to the Eskom data portal, where there's a wealth of information available to you. And then, of course, the financial information is also available from our website. Mariam, I'm going to deftly avoid answering your question by referring it to the 2 ministers concerned, as well as to the lenders. The energy mix, as I indicated yesterday, is a policy decision which is dictated by IRP 19, and that is the purview of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. So therefore, Eskom is not at liberty to comment on government policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. And thank you, Monde. Owen Nkomo, please do find the unmute button, but before you, Sabelo Skiti will have found his by now. Please go ahead, Sabelo. Owen, do you want to take the spot, please?
Yes, thank you, Bob. I'm sure you can hear me from where I am. My question is more on the financial side of this challenge that we're facing as a country. It's a problem we've had for if I can call it decades. I worry that in the next 5 years to 10 years, if we don't deal with the big ticket items, with the big numbers item that says just how much money does the country need to raise to make sure that Eskom can have a permanent fix to these maintenance issues, the necessary upgrades that need to be done. Just how much money does South Africa need to raise in order for us to make sure that we don't sit here again and have these addresses? Because if we don't deal with this permanently through, arranging funding, that will make sure that we don't have to sit here and have these conversations. Instead, we are able to grow the country because the permanent Eskom solution has been found. So the question is, how big is the number that we need to raise in order for us to fix this Eskom problem permanently?
Thank you, Owen. Owen Nkomo is the MD of Inkunzi Investments. He managed to sneak into the media event. Before you answer that question, please, Andre, I will read one from Adre again. Adri, is Eskom maintenance program being adequately addressed on the ground at power stations with strategic professionals at hand? That is a question that I would like you and Jan to help answer. And then please address Owen's question. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Sikanati. I think the first answer to Mr. Nkomo's question, how much is required to fix Eskom? On an annual basis, generation requires around 10 to 12 billion rand in order to spend on maintenance. However, we must emphasize that our generation fleet is on average 41 years old, and we now need to introduce additional capacity in order to make provision for the plants that are now rapidly reaching their end of life and that are going to be repurposed and in some instances repowered with a smaller output in order to ensure that the transition to a lower carbon economy is in fact a just one. So with respect, the question really is not how much will it cost to fix Eskom. At a certain stage, again to use the car analogy, I'm going to stay away from horses today, we need to buy a new car. It just costs too much to fix the old car. And this is exactly the opportunity that we've got with the money made available as a first step, following on the commitments made at COP26, that we can access concessional funding internationally to kickstart this just energy transition to a lower carbon economy. In response to Audrey's question, when you want to do open heart surgery, do you put an ad in the newspaper and go for the lowest of the bids that you receive from qualifying surgeons? And that really is part of the discussion that we are having with National Treasury to ensure that, as Jan explained at length yesterday, when you drive let's call it a luxury German automobile, that you take it for a service at an appropriately accredited and trained facility with the right mechanics employed. To put your car out for repair when you go for the lowest of 3 quotes really does not yield the best and most appropriate maintenance outcomes. So I think there is an opportunity here for us to change our approach in terms of how we procure the services as well as the spares required for these maintenance outages in order to ensure that we have a better predictability of outcomes once we have spent the money. Thanks, Sikonati.
Thank you, Andre. Is Jan able to add anything to that question, please?
Sikonati, Jan is not on this call. He has another pressing engagement that he needed to attend to. And it's not a power station, just for the avoidance of doubt.
Not a problem. Thank you. The next question comes from Terence Creamer of Engineering News. From what I recall, your summer US LF base case, that is unplanned capacity loss factor, with minimal load shedding was 12,000 megawatts. You are currently below that level and you are still load shedding. Do you have a new UCLF base case for summer, and what is the new load shedding versus diesel usage sensitivity when you breach that base case by 1,000 megawatts, by 2,000 megawatts, and by 3,000 megawatts? That's a question from Terence Creamer. There is a hand from Kyle Cohen. Please ask your question, Kyle. Unmute yourself and then lower your hand. Thank you.
Thanks, Sikonati. Mr. Director, there are 3 repeat offender power stations that have repeatedly caused quite a lot of problems for Eskom, being Tutuka, Duva, and Kendall. They've been responsible for about 3,000 megawatts of unplanned losses over the past week or more. But recently we saw traditionally very reliable power stations, being Letabo specifically, also contributing to unplanned breakdowns. Is this a concern, number one? And number 2, are you focusing reliability and philosophy maintenance plans more on these repeat offenders to try and bring them back to a level that is slightly more acceptable? Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Kyle writes for News 24. Do you want to tackle that last question, Andre, or you are going to take both? Do we have Rulani Matebula on the line by any chance? Thank you.
Sikonati, I'm here. It's Rulani here. Would you want Andre to talk first, or should I?
Go ahead, please, Rulani.
Yeah. I would leave the first part. Let me deal with the second part of the question, Sikonati, which was talking to reliability maintenance, whether is it focused on the stations that are struggling the most or not. And unfortunately, our reliability maintenance is a very focused program, and each of our generators have to be taken off based on the running hours. So it follows a particular schedule, and you cannot necessarily interchange it. So if we say this unit is performing well, and we say we're not going to do anything on it because we need to put attention on the one that is not doing well, we are actually just digging our own grave. So we have to give these units the attention. I think Andre used the example of a car. So if your car has to be serviced in the 15,000 case, that is what we're doing. We go in and we do maintenance on when it's due. That is the way in which we can succeed. So we are not changing based on the current environment. What we did when we introduced the reliability maintenance is that we reviewed our approach, our planning, our execution of work to be able to cater for the current challenges that we are experiencing. However, the routine and the schedule remains, because if we don't do that, we might find ourselves in an even worse situation. So even the best performing stations like Letaba, when it's due for maintenance, we take it off and maintain it so that we can sustain that good performance.
Rulani, thank you. Do you want to also tackle the question from Terence about the level of breakdowns and what that means for the base case scenario, please?
Yeah, when we share our outlook, Sikonati, we do indicate that we are planning on a best case of 10,000 megawatts unplanned, and then we put an extra 1,000, which goes to 11, 12, and being the West, which in our outlook you will see that when we are at 12, we actually experience a lot of. We start experiencing many days of load shedding at that stage. So what is happening at this current moment is that we find ourselves moving between 11 and beyond 12 in a short space of time, obviously putting us in this situation. However, what we need to add is that we are currently running with a risk of up to 4,000 megawatts continuously in the system, and that is why Andre and Jan would say we need additional capacity so that we can be able to do proper maintenance. So currently, as we are running today, there is 4,000 of capacity, which units have defects that needs to be attended to. But we cannot just take them off because it will obviously exacerbate the issue of the lack of demand of supply. So we manage this risk on a day-to-day basis. So at a time, we find ourselves breaching this 12,000 mark and obviously resulting in load shedding. So in summer, we see our UCLF going up to 12 as a norm, mostly based on the effects of weather conditions, whether rain or heat in terms of our stations based in the north. So in winter, then we see this reducing to 10. So that is our planning horizon. Thanks.
Thank you, Rulani. Rulani Matebula is the acting generation executive, and he hid his face, so you did not see him. He's a young man, handsome. Let's take the next question, please, colleagues. I have Faisal Patel again from Radio Islam. How much money from COP26 will Eskom be getting? That's a question for you, Honorary Director.
I think also one, Sikonati. That's the 8.531 billion rand, and the lion's share of that we anticipate will be allocated to Eskom.
Thank you, Andre. Let's just clarify again the particular facilities, the detail and how all of those will operate will be worked out in the next few weeks now that the announcement by the respective governments has been made. Thank you for that. Lamirs Omaji from Fin24 wants to know, can we get clarity on what is happening at Quebec? The National Nuclear Regulator issued a statement indicating routine testing by Eskom detected an airborne contamination at the Central Alarm Station. Is the plant stable and safe? That's Lamis Omaji. Andre, I'm not sure if we do have our colleagues here, the Chief Nuclear Operator, but you can take that.
All right, thanks. I think, first of all, we recently received very good news from the global benchmarking organization of nuclear operators that Eskom also belongs to. For a period of time, Koeberg was classified as a station that was in special care in order to improve its operational functions. After a recent in-person visit by a team from this organization, that status has been lifted. So Kuberg's operation is now back against some of the amongst the best in the world, and we are now more comfortable than ever that the station is safe. So just to clarify what exactly happened with the report of the leak. So there is a ventilation system that goes into an underground bunker where a control room is located. From time to time, we are required to introduce a very low-level radioisotope into the ventilation system to test whether or not, in the event of a real leak, that ventilation system will avoid the exposure of workers in the control room to any radiation. And this is a precautionary measure that we do precisely to test on a regular basis the appropriateness of our safety mechanisms. Now, we did, after introducing this radioisotope, which of course is a deliberate testing exercise, we did detect a small quantity of radioactivity in the control room, which means that the testing indicated that there was a need for us to again relook at the ventilation. I may just point out that the annual dose limit for radiation workers is 20,000 microsieverts. The exposure that one of our employees was exposed to as a result of this test was 250 microsieverts. So you can see from that that this is really nothing that is to be alarmed about. It was a routine test, and it was a deliberate introduction of this radioisotope precisely in order to identify where we needed to improve. So to answer the question, the plant is stable and the plant is safe. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andre. The last question, audio question we will take now comes from Clyde Mallinson. He's back on the with his hand up. Please lower your hand, Clyde, and answer your question. We have also closed the chat now, an hour after the meeting, and we will answer all the questions that are before us. Please, Clyde, talk to us.
Thanks. Thank you. Could Eskom perhaps give us an indication of the quantum of unsuccessful bid window 5 projects, wind and solar, that could perhaps be rapidly made available for wheeling electricity to private customers, given grid constraints? In other words, Eskom will know where those projects are. They'll know where the grid constraints are. And it would be great if we could get an indication that there are, let's say, 5,000 megawatts of solar and 2,000 megawatts of wind that would not have evacuation constraints, and that could be made rapidly available to system energy needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Clyde. Sekgomotso, are you able, or do you want to take that, Andre?
Yeah, I think, Clyde, it's again a question that is probably best addressed to the IPP office. It's our understanding that the number of bids submitted significantly exceeded the number of preferred bidders that were in fact announced by the DMRE. So we think that this is a good indication that there is significant appetite for additional investment in generation capacity by the private sector. For the particulars of exactly where and when these projects that did not meet the criteria posed by the IPP office, I suggest that you refer that question to the IPP office, as we are not part of that procurement process, as I explained yesterday. Thanks, Clyde.
Thank you, Andre. That was the last audio question we will take for this afternoon. I have also closed the chat to questions. We have been an hour into it. I will now read all the questions that have already been posed, and we will then close the meeting once we have had a response to those. Sabelo Skiti has now conceded defeat to technology and has written his question down. He is from the Sunday Times. On the 50-50 megawatt PLL, can Eskom tell us how many units at how many stations are involved here? Also, how many units are currently running at full capacity and where are they? So that first part is on the 5,050 megawatt partial load losses. Can Eskom tell us how many units and how many stations are involved? Rolani, are you able to answer that question, please? Show us your face as well.
Hi, Sikonati, thanks for the question. Yeah, actually, it's besides our picking station, all stations at this point in time have got the partial load losses. It obviously differs in magnitude from one station to the other. So all of our stations at the moment have got a few megawatts that have been booked on partials. So I can count the number of units. It's probably going to take us a long time. But all sites have got megawatts on our partial load losses at the moment.
Thank you, Roland. Zainul Dawood of Daily News is asking a question that was dealt with significantly yesterday. There have been various calls from various political parties and some NGO calling for the resignation of Direte. What is his reaction to this type of public pressure? Let's move to Clyde. You have already asked your question, so I am going to skip it. And lastly, Chris Yeland asks, the City of Cape Town has denied that it did not comply with instruction from the system operator. Was the City of Cape Town one of the offending municipal distributors or not? Monde has dealt again with that question, Chris, but I will give him an opportunity to clarify one last time. And Monde, why are you naming offending municipal distributors and not the offending key industrial customers? I will leave you, Monde, to answer those for now, and then take the last one from Alexander Winning of Reuters.
Yeah, no thanks, Skonati. I thought we dealt with the question on the City of Cape Town, and I think we have addressed that question previously. Why are we naming offending municipalities and not key customers? I don't recall I've named offending municipalities. All I've indicated is that those that are fully compliant based on what you could pick up from our system, I've indicated those two. I did not name any other entity. So on that, maybe let me take this opportunity, Skonati, because I see there was another question by Chris regarding City Power and the situation with Kelvin. Chris, the issue with City Power and Kelvin, as opposed to the City of Cape Town that uses Steenbras as their emergency facility, Steenbras is not part of the base of the City of Cape Town. When we announce the load shedding, whichever stages, the City of Cape Town, they then dispatch the supply from Steenbras to cushion themselves against stage 1 and to some extent stage 2 for a limited period of time. On the Kelvin side, it's slightly different. Kelvin is part of the base. I had previously indicated in another media conference whereby I've indicated that Kelvin, the City of Johannesburg and City Power have signed a new PPA with the operators of Kelvin for further extension of the supply from Kelvin. In that, there is an indication that Kelvin might be ramping up their generation. So it is that ramp up that can be considered for as a cushion against load shedding, and not necessarily Kelvin in its entirety. I may also indicate that in the scenario of the City of Cape Town, Steenbras, that is an arrangement that they have with the regulator and not necessarily with Eskom. So a similar sort of approach and process will have to be followed by City Power and the City of Johannesburg. Thank you, Sikonati.
Thank you, Mande. Alex Winning from Reuters wants to know when do we expect the first funds from that 131 billion rand facility to start flowing into South Africa, and what the mixture will be. Will there be grant funding? Andre, you have answered that question about the detail will still be worked out and in the coming months. Is there anything you wish to add to that? If not, the question coming from Kylan from EWN, that's Eyewitness News. The Basic Education Department has indicated that it has requested an urgent meeting with Eskom management regarding the impact of load shedding on the grade 12 examinations. How has the discussion been thus far? What is Eskom's response to the concerns? Thank you.
Right, thanks, Sikonati. Let me first deal with Alex's question. We are working with the DFIs to make that happen as soon as we can. I think there's a lot of urgency also from the lender group to ensure that this does not remain an empty political commitment. Some of the bureaucrats, of course, both locally and abroad, would be satisfied with a political announcement, but we now need to translate that into a practicable commercial agreement that will allow us to make use of these funds to start our just energy transition process. And earlier today, I've already had the first engagements with one of the lenders to see how we can accelerate and get that money on the ground ready to do some good work for South Africa as soon as we can. The question from Kalen, that meeting has not yet taken place, so we are very aware of the impact that load shedding has on matrics. Again, it's highly regrettable that this bout of load shedding coincides with the matric exams, and this is something that we really wish to apologize for, and we will engage with the Department of Basic Education to explain the situation to them and to also reassure them that we're doing everything in our power to bring capacity back onto the grid as soon as possible so that we can also relieve the situation, particularly insofar as those matric students are concerned. Thanks, Sikonati.
Thanks, Andre. Then there's this follow-up from Sabelo, and there will be one last question for this session coming from Kyle Cohen. Sabelo Skiti 1, Jan Oberholzer yesterday said Treasury or procurement rules impacted Eskom when it came to appointing maintenance contractors. Can that please be unpacked? 2, can Eskom confirm regarding maintenance whether procurement for parts is done from stations or from head office? Is there no way of preempting the need for these parts based on wear and tear? That's Sabelo's questions. Lastly, Kyle Cohen says first part of his question was unanswered. Is Mr. Durete concerned over unplanned breakdowns at traditionally best performing power stations, particularly Litago? Andre, please, can you deal with those?
Thank you, Sikonati. I think I've elaborated a bit on the impact that a lowest of three quotes approach has on the level of skill and competence that you get when you go out and you test the market as is required, when you know that you should ideally be approaching that well-qualified mechanic with all of the appropriate diagnostic tools and all of the original equipment manufacturer spares close to hand. So the procurement processes currently that are in place that we need to abide by in terms of the Public Finance Management Act do act as a constraint on us to enter into the sort of long-term partnerships with original equipment manufacturers to ensure that maintenance is done not only with the appropriate quality spares, but also with the appropriate skills that are required to carry out this maintenance. Some of the skill required to do this maintenance is hard to come by. And what we find is that if we award contracts on a short-term basis, it's very difficult for contractors to retain those skills inside their organization. And when a new lower bidder then wins a contract, it is sometimes difficult for that bidder to secure the appropriate skill in time for us to carry out the maintenance to the desired quality. Procurement of parts is really a blend between some being done centrally and some being done at the power station level. We have launched an extensive effort to improve the control over our stores. I make a point of, when I visit a power station, to also visit our warehouses and our stores, because this is where a very large portion of our working capital is located, around about 1.1 to 1.3 billion rand in spares and inventory per power station, so big money. And one of the activities that we have so far implemented successfully is to enforce control over spares procurement using our SAP system. You may recall last year there was a bit of news flow around procurement, and in the beginning of 2020, we were procuring less than 35% of our spares on so-called fixed contracts, where you have to specify a specific commodity number which obviates the potential for fraud or rampant overcharging. And I can make reference to MOPs and so forth that you'll all be very familiar with. That situation has since been rectified, and we are now in a position where we've got in excess of 92% of our spares being done in a very well-controlled and well-managed way using our SAP system. The next step, and this is work that has been ongoing for quite some time, is to introduce proper barcoding, potentially RFID chips to be used on our spares so that we can ensure that we've got proper control, checking in of spares, checking out of spares, that is done automatically using barcode scanners. It was actually rather surprising to me this technology had not been introduced, because this is really not novel and is very much best practice. So this is a project that we've got ongoing to introduce that, bearing in mind, of course, that we have extensive ranges of spares that we have to do. So this is not a simple exercise that we can implement overnight. As far as Kyle's question is concerned, yes, Kyle, we are concerned. We are not happy that we see the level of unplanned breakdowns at our top performing stations, Matimba being another one, in addition to Letabo. We have given specific attention to improving the performance of those stations by stepping up our maintenance oversight. so that we can ensure that we protect and restore those stations to their former level of performance. Sikanati, if there are no further questions, perhaps I can just give a bit of an overview of some of the issues that we are managing as Eskom. I think it could be interesting to this audience. I leave you to, as our program director, guide the discussion forward. Thank you.
That indeed will be your closing remark, Andre. Go ahead, and we will then close the meeting and bid you all farewell, colleagues. Thank you again for joining us at such short notice. I must remind you that we will email the whole recorded conversation to all journalists that are on our distribution list. If you are not receiving emails from Eskom, please send an email to mediadesk@eskom.co.za and you will receive a copy of this discussion. Please close, Andre, with those remarks.
Thank you, Sikanati, and thanks to everybody for attending the call this afternoon. We shall try to be more brief and concise tomorrow. The intention is not for us to spend an hour and a half every day on system updates. We are looking more at a timeline of around 10 to 20 minutes. So we understand that there are many questions to be asked, and we therefore want to just give you an outlook on the performance of our system. But as far as Iscom is concerned, I think it is important to just note that we operate one of the largest fleets of power stations in the world. We have a very complex network, about 30 power stations with a total nominal capacity of 45 gigawatts. Of course, not all of that is available all the time. We have 2 hydro stations. We've got a nuclear power station. We've got 3 pump storage stations. And we've then got to connect all of these generation assets to our customers so that when the demand is there, that we can meet that. And for that, we have 391,000 kilometers of various high, medium, and low voltage lines. So this is really an extraordinary investment in infrastructure put in place over many, many years. It's a national asset that should be looked after, that should be maintained properly. We also have installed capacity of 306,949 MVA. So huge investments again that we are continuously expanding on. We have an aggressive program in place to enable the addition of new generation capacity, not only by ourselves, but also to enable new private generation capacity to be added to the grid as soon as possible. And in that context, clearly there are operational challenges that we are addressing as management. We don't always get it right, but I can assure you of the huge dedication and commitment from the Eskom team to discharge our responsibility to the 60 million people of South Africa to ensure that we avoid the type of situation that we found ourselves in over the past week. This is not where we want to be, and I can give you our commitment as an organization that we are putting out all the stops to address this to the best of our ability, given the various contexts within which we operate. Thank you very much, and we shall have a much shorter meeting tomorrow to give you an update on the system. With that, colleagues, we are adjourned. Thank you.
And that will be at 10 a.m., am I correct?
That is at